Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today is a Patreon request from the artist in question. I'm talking about the sorta new album from Sweguno, No Right or Wrong Way Forward. Yeah, why not? 2 Patreon reviews in 2 days. Wasn't really planning on it, since this particular album was sent in to me via the $10 tier of my Patreon page. Sweguno is the alias for Canadian experimental IDM artist Dan Ainsley. He's technically been putting out small amounts of work for a while now, though this project is his debut album, released on Neblina Records this past October. Obviously, I had never heard of this guy before he DM'd me out of the blue, I think on Discogs of all places, before I directed him over to my Patreon. This was obviously several months ago, so as with all Patreon requests, he's been waiting a bit. I finally got around to putting it on just yesterday, hoping to get like a quick text post out on it to coincide with Bandcamp Friday. However, I was really caught off guard by what I ended up hearing on this thing and decided, no, you know what, I think this one deserves a proper video. The sound design on this thing is legit excellent, and I did not see it coming. There's a good chance this could have made my year-end list if that part of the year hadn't been way too busy or given me the spare time to actually get around to hearing it then. Though also getting to it late, I guess it means it got a little more space for me to highlight it in a way that may or may not end up getting him more attention, so I guess we'll see how that goes. So I hit play on this thing and I got treated to a nearly 10-minute opening track, Never Leave Today. A slowly evolving piece that starts out with some ambient blends of guitars and wordless vocal harmonies, but builds into all these clanking but hard-hitting and heavy percussion textures that sound like hitting various metal objects aligned to a really off-kilter regular pattern that feels like it's constantly speeding up and slowing down. I guess it has a bit of a drunk affect to it, you could say. And across the length of the track, it's joined by, like, quick little spoken word digressions, more dynamic vocal harmonies trying to add up to a choir-like effect. That's a pretty big element throughout this whole album, the wordless vocal harmonies and stuff. Also various wobbling and buzzing bass textures. I feel like I even heard some strings in there too. It gets really epic and expansive, and there's even like a change up around the 7-minute mark where the original percussion patterns are completely ditched and replaced with some much more fast-paced drum machines alongside some glittering pianos in the background. And there's a whole moody ambient outro after that as well, which almost sounds like its own separate track. That is just the opener on this thing. God damn. Had me like, holy shit, this is some insanely impressive work, especially to be hearing out of some obscure no-name artist releasing his debut album. And while that opener is probably the most elaborate track out of the 8 on display here, I was even more pleasantly surprised to hear the remaining tracks all added their own distinct ideas that were no less dense and well-produced, but all sounded different in a way that still fit together well enough into an overarching whole. The album's biggest banger is probably the second track here, Memento, Vivere. 6-minute workout, almost entirely based around crazy layers of percussion textures, both ranging from more organic sounding sound effects as well as more standard drum machines, but with the kind of density to almost bring something like, I don't know, Outakers Untilted to mind, or really more reminding me of, I guess, that Lorenzo Bianchi Hoesch thing from a few years back. Not even to get into the slight fragments of like vocal stuttering or the more expansive ambient pads that show up in other parts and slowly overtake more and more of the track as it goes along. The next track, Nephany, kind of returns to a similar blend of sounds as the opener. The percussion mostly sounds like slower live drumming, even if the cymbals get lots of glitches and stutter edits. And there's more of a focus on the wordless vocal textures that have a little bit of a stronger melodic through line than other moments on this thing. Although this track grabbed me a lot more in its second half, as there was a bit of a switch up that brought in other synth textures vaguely shaped to resemble brass sections and some new melodic patterns that were much more based around a foundation of piano chords, brought in a bit more of a mysterious emotional effect, alongside new percussion sounds that resemble like ice clattering around a drinking glass or something. Although speaking of pianos, I feel like those get utilized in an even more exciting way on the next track, Affect All. That track is almost entirely based around the piano and brings in a whole bunch of tense, emotionally conflicted classical and jazz-influenced melodic cadences, though it also brings back in the wordless vocals, almost resembling like Gregorian chant or something this time, and it also evolves into like a super thick and heavy string-driven drone piece about halfway through with lots of intense bass. This track feels very Reed Willis-like to me in the best way. The next track, Alluvion Chain, meanwhile, contrasts the darker and more dramatic tone of the previous track with a marginally more playful feel, bringing in some more video game-like synth textures to add on top of a mix that otherwise resembles plenty of others on the album, with more pianos and wordless vocals and crazy complex percussion workouts that hit, I guess, a little bit more of an uplifting note compared to other moments on the album. Then after that, there's two tracks which are significantly shorter than all the other ones here. As a Mirror is only about 2.5 minutes, but it still manages to sneak in a striking enough idea to remain a notable attention-grabbing highlight. It's another massive percussive banger whose, like, rolling, stuttered, banging noises and kicks are given a bit more, like, distortion and weight than other moments here, so that one goes hard. And then Space Beyond the Window provides an even more abbreviated, less than 2-minute ambient breather to, I guess, contrast the previous track. And that leaves the album's closer, Chronophobe Rend, which is designed to directly mirror the opener and bring the album around full circle. Another 9+ minute epic, although one that still manages to feel more than distinct enough from the other moments here. It still uses lots of wordless vocals, synth effects, and light pianos in a lot of the same ways as other tracks on this thing, but the percussion feels a lot more based around, like, more organic Indian and Middle Eastern sounds, and some of the synths have a little bit of a flatter texture to resemble, I guess, old 70s synth pioneers like Vangelis or something. They get quite dramatic at the very end of it. And once again, the track has a whole bunch of moving parts and evolves into various distinct subsections to make for quite the climactic finish. Oh yeah, and if you get the album on Bandcamp, there's also a bonus remix of the opening track by the artist 400 Lonely Things, which is tacked on at the end, subtitled the Always Stay Tomorrow version. That version is way more ambient drone-centric than the original, and does away with nearly all the percussion, but also floats into a whole bunch of different interesting territory and strange organic dark ambient effects that weren't touched upon by the original track, so that's neat too. And yeah, that's everything on No Right or Wrong Way Forward. One hell of a debut effort, I have to say. I won't act like there weren't other albums from last year that connected with me on an even more personal level than this, and if there are, I guess, more minor criticisms I could levy at this, it is the kind of listening experience that oddly feels longer than it really is. It's only about 45 minutes total, not including the bonus remix at the end, and it felt to me more like an hour. The sequencing on this thing is great, although the overall pacing and structuring, it might be a very slight bit on the lopsided side. It's not that noticeable, but it's a very slight thing, if that. Also, while the melodies do well to hit on certain emotions they're going for, I wouldn't say any of them were likely to, like, stick in my head or anything. Doesn't feel like they were really trying to, but, you know, that's another thing. And I guess if I want to be even more unnecessarily nitpicky, I could point out that the Bandcamp description briefly describes this album as a sonic treatise on the contemporary world, which I don't know if I'd go that far. If this was intended as a political statement, then on title alone, No Right or Wrong Way Forward is kind of a nothing sentiment, I guess. The most I can say on that front is that it's like a very vague expression of confusion at the artist's own place in the world. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. This is not really a criticism. This album obviously doesn't need to have any kind of deeper statement about the current state of the world, nor does it feel like it was ever trying to do that in the first place. At the end of the day, it is clearly just an excuse to deliver a lot of really cool sounding sound design, and that sound design is way too impressive for any of that other stuff to matter too much. This is just a ridiculously cool sounding album that clearly had an absolute crap ton of effort and creativity put into it, and it definitely deserves to get more attention than it is getting, easily in the same tier of enjoyment for me as, like, anything that made the bottom half of my top 20 albums of 2025, so yeah, definitely make sure to check this one out. I'm overall feeling an 8.3 out of 10 on it. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters, they're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.